I've always said land is like socks, better left in your drawer than on someone else's feet. My father used to mutter the same thing, minus the sarcasm. He had a way of treating every patch of dirt like a legacy. Maybe that's why he left me those 2 dusty acres down on the southern edge of Prescott. It wasn't exactly prime real estate, just brush, cactus, and rocks, but I kept the property taxes paid and the records straight, out of a stubborn kind of loyalty. Never built anything on it. Never leased it. Just visited now and then to air out the conscience, fire up the old Weber, and grill meat like a man avoiding both therapy and commitment. It had been about 6 months since my last trip out there. Business at my surveying company had picked up, I'd been booked solid, and frankly, I'd almost forgotten the land existed. But one Thursday afternoon, I found myself craving silence and smoke, both from a ribeye and a cheap cigar, so I loaded up the truck and headed south. The air was sharp that day, sky wide and blue, and the road was empty enough that I made it in under 20 minutes. When I turned onto the gravel path leading to my land, I almost drove past it. Something didn't look right. There was a new sign, a black metal plate with white block letters, Private Drive, Residents Only. The lettering was too clean, the bolts too fresh. My brow furrowed as I slowed to a crawl. Then I saw the second sign. Smile, you're on camera. I laughed out loud. Not a happy laugh. The kind of laugh that starts in the gut, but ends with a snort of disbelief. I pulled forward, expecting to find maybe a squatter's trailer, a few lawn chairs, maybe a meth camper at worst. But as I cleared the rise, I damn near drove into a circular driveway. There it was, a house, a full-size, 2-story, modern monstrosity sitting squarely on my dirt. White stucco, dark trim, palm trees that had no business growing in this climate, and a saltwater pool that sparkled like it was begging to be repossessed. There was even a little patch of fresh sod near the fence, trimmed with garden lights. It looked like something off HGTV had dropped from the sky and landed right in my ribs. I parked on the edge of the property, stunned. For a second, I thought maybe I'd taken a wrong turn. Maybe this wasn't my land at all. But I opened my phone, pulled up the GPS coordinates I had memorized for years, and cross-referenced it with county records. There was no mistake. This castle of arrogance and chlorine was sitting dead center on my legally recorded land. A door opened. A man stepped out, early 40s, cargo shorts, polo shirt tucked too tightly, the kind of guy who uses Bluetooth earpieces at gas stations and says, partner, without owning a horse. He looked surprised to see me, which I found impressive, considering he had installed security cameras. He walked down the steps with the gait of a man who believed nothing could touch him, not rain, not taxes, and definitely not lawsuits. "You lost, bud?" he asked, giving my truck the kind of look people usually reserve for used mattresses left on the curb. "Nope," I said. I killed the engine and stepped out. "Pretty sure this is my land." He laughed, not politely. "Nah, this one's mine. I built it. Had the lot cleared last spring. Looked abandoned for like a decade. Nobody ever came around." I took a step forward, but stayed outside the fence. "That's funny, because I've been paying taxes on this place for over 20 years. I received receipts in the amount of $2,500. His smile didn't even twitch. "Well," he said, crossing his arms, "finders keepers, right? It's not like there was a house here, and I couldn't find any posted deed at the site." I blinked slowly. He really believed that. That land just becomes yours if you squat on it long enough. That silence equals surrender. "I think you're going to want to talk to a lawyer," I said. "Already did," he replied smugly. "There's something called adverse possession. Look it up. You should have done something with the place if you didn't want to lose it. Build or sell, or at least put up a fence. Snooze, lose, buddy. I didn't argue. Arguing would have made him feel powerful. Instead, I smiled. Not a happy smile. The kind of smile that says, I just found my new hobby. Well, I said, tipping an imaginary hat, enjoy it while you can. Then I turned around, got in my truck, and drove off. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Like a man who'd just discovered someone built him a $500,000 house for free and forgot to check who owned the dirt underneath. The next morning, I made coffee, turned off my phone, and pulled out every file I had on that land. Tax records, plat maps, county surveys, my father's handwritten notes from the early 90s, all of it came out of the dusty drawer labeled Someday. Well, Someday had arrived, wearing boat shoes and claiming squatters' rights. I wasn't angry, not really. I'd been in enough land disputes professionally to know that anger was a waste of strategy. What I felt was sharper, something like cold clarity. That man didn't just trespass, he built a dream house on someone else's dirt and then dared to smirk about it. That wasn't a mistake, that was a challenge. By noon, I was down at the county assessor's office filing a formal property claim reaffirming active ownership. The clerk, a woman named Rhonda, had seen me enough times through the years to skip the pleasantries. You back for a boundary adjustment? Nope, I said, sliding over my folder. Just letting you know I still own what I've always owned. And someone's about to regret not triple-checking the records. She raised an eyebrow when I showed her the satellite image with a house clearly squatting like a trophy on my land. Oh boy, she said, that's going to be a hell of a mess. I intend to clean it up. From there, I contacted a real estate attorney named Mitchell Fry. I'd met him during a land title dispute years ago. He was the kind of lawyer who smiled like a shark and billed like a surgeon, but he knew his stuff and didn't waste time. He called me back 2 hours later, voice already humming with interest. So let me get this straight, Mitchell said. A guy built a custom home and pool on your land because you hadn't developed it? That's the gist of it. Well, Calvin, Merry damn Christmas. Let's talk litigation. Mitchell filed a formal notice of encroachment the next day, citing unlawful development and demand for immediate vacatur of premises within 30 days. We had the tax records, the GPS-aligned surveys, and even time-stamped drone footage showing the land over the past decade. Untouched, but always mine. It was airtight. 3 days after that, I had the letter hand-delivered to Jared's new mailbox. Now, I'll say this. Most men in his position might panic. Some might cry. A few might even call to apologize. Not Jared. He doubled down. The following week, he posted a video to social media. I only saw it because a former client of mine sent me a link with the caption, "Isn't this your land?" There he was, Jared, standing poolside with a margarita in hand, shirt off, tan lines proudly broadcast to the internet. "See this?" he said, panning around the patio with his phone. "Apparently some random old guy thinks he owns my property. Probably jealous. He showed up here like some kind of cowboy with paper maps. Well, guess what? I live here. I built this, and nobody's taking it from me." He ended the video by flipping off the camera and jumping into the pool. Classy. I didn't respond online. I didn't call. I didn't knock on his gate. I'm not built for drama. I'm built for documentation. Instead, I hired a photographer to take aerial shots of the property from multiple angles. I collected utility records that showed Jared had only recently applied for hookup, long after my property tax payments for the year had cleared. I found a municipal zoning request he'd filed under a completely wrong parcel number, one that didn't even belong to him. Mitchell was practically giggling. But I wasn't quite done yet. On a crisp Monday morning, I drove back out to the property. Jared wasn't home, which made things easier. Just outside the fence, by the edge of the old dirt access road, I hammered a wooden sign into the ground. Bright yellow letters across the top read, "Coming soon. Guests with bulldozers." The legal owner. I even added a QR code linking to the county GIS system that showed the parcel registered in my name. It was visible from the street, especially the part with his address written under the title, "Current Occupant, Mr. Jared F., not the owner." 2 days later, Mitchell called. "Guess what showed up in the city's project records?" I raised an eyebrow. "What?" "A preliminary development plan for a new access road, a school, and a residential expansion. Sunstream Estates. Guess what plot sits right in the middle of the planned easement?" "Mine?" "Ours. And that clown built a house dead center on what's about to be one of the most valuable access points in the region." That changed things. It also explained why Jared had been in such a rush to build. He wasn't just taking free land. He was speculating, banking on the city needing access through that strip. He didn't think I'd notice, didn't think I'd care. But now he'd handed me a fully furnished, strategically located house on a silver platter, with a pool. I sat back in my chair, sipped my coffee, and chuckled. Game on. Things started getting real when I listed the house. For sale. That's right. I hired a real estate agent, one I trusted, and we put together a glowing MLS listing for a recently constructed luxury home with pool and manicured yard on 2 acres of prime southern Prescott real estate. The asking price wasn't cheap, and I didn't intend for it to be. Not when the land sat smack in the middle of the proposed Sunstream Estates expansion. Access roads, future schools, retail zoning, and now a house with no mortgage and no legal owner but me. The listing went live on a Thursday. By Friday, we already had 3 inquiries. A young couple from Flagstaff wanted to tour it that weekend. My agent called Jared to inform the current occupant that a showing would be taking place. I wish I could have seen his face when he heard that. Saturday rolled around and the couple arrived with my agent, a cheerful woman named Dana, who wore heels too impractical for dirt, and a smile sharp enough to slice drywall. Jared must have seen them coming, because by the time they reached the gate, he was already standing there shirtless and defiant. The couple thought he was the groundskeeper. "Hi," the woman chirped. "We're here for the showing. This is beautiful. Do you work for the owner?" Jared's smile died on impact. "I am the owner." Dana calmly stepped in. "That's interesting, because we have the legal documents showing otherwise. Calvin Manning is the recorded owner of this parcel, and we're operating under a signed listing agreement." "I built this house," Jared snapped. "This is mine. I live here." Dana didn't flinch. "Do you have title to the land?" I have possession," he stammered. "Possession isn't title," she said, tilting her head like she was explaining geometry to a stubborn cat. The couple exchanged a look. Then the man asked, "So, are you saying you built this house on someone else's property?" Jared's ears turned red. "It was abandoned. Nobody ever claimed it." Dana handed the couple a packet with my tax history, zoning confirmations, and a copy of the formal encroachment notice Jared had conveniently ignored. They left shortly after, politely but quickly. The man kept glancing back at the pool like it had personally betrayed him. I watched the whole thing from the next property over, parked behind a scraggly mesquite bush, sipping iced tea like it was opening night at the theater. That night, Jared posted a second video. This time, no margarita, just rage. "So now this guy's trying to sell my house? I built this place with my own hands, paid for every nail, and now he wants to profit off my work like some kind of corporate vulture? "This is theft. I'm taking him to court." And take me to court he did. The following week, his lawyer filed a counterclaim, alleging that Jared had gained rights to the property under adverse possession, the oldest squatter's Hail Mary in the book. His angle was that I'd abandoned the land and that he had invested significant resources and lived there openly, thus satisfying the requirement for hostile and continuous possession. Problem was, adverse possession in Arizona requires at least 10 years of such occupation. Jared had been squatting for just over a year. On top of that, I'd been paying taxes every year, never surrendered title, and had documentation going back 2 decades. Still, I knew better than to underestimate stupidity armed with a legal budget. That's when I started doing some deeper digging into his building permits. Turns out, when Jared applied for utilities and permits, he used the parcel number of his own lot, which sat 2 properties over. That explained how he got approval for construction without triggering a red flag. The building department thought he was improving his actual land, not stealing mine. His contractor had probably been in on it, or was just too lazy to verify coordinates. Mitchell, my attorney, practically cackled when I handed him the findings. This guy is a ticking time bomb with no fuse left. But Jared wasn't finished making terrible decisions. About a week after the failed showing, he held a backyard party. Loud music, a rented margarita machine, inflatable water slide, the works. Photos ended up on social media. Desert oasis, dream house vibes, my castle. One of them had a caption that read, "Some old clown wants to take my land. LOL. Good luck, cowboy." I took a screenshot. Actually, I took 7. Mitchell filed them under exhibits demonstrating conscious trespass and disregard for lawful ownership. We were building a paper wall, brick by brick, and Jared kept handing us the mortar. What Jared hadn't realized was that the city's development plan had moved into public feedback phase, which meant more eyes on maps, more questions about land access, and more pressure for title clarity. My phone started ringing, not just from buyers, but from the city itself. They wanted to know if I was open to easement negotiations for the access road. I said I was, once the land was vacated and clean. That set a clock ticking. Jared knew it too, because the next day I received a certified letter from a historical property research firm. It included a rediscovered deed from the 70s claiming that Jared's grandfather had once purchased the land through a handshake deal with a rancher, who never recorded it properly. It was printed on yellowed paper, written in typewriter font, and bore a county seal that hadn't been used since 1968. Mitchell took one look and burst out laughing. "A forgery," he said. "An amateur one." But it told me something important. Jared was panicking, and panicked people make mistakes. I intended to help him make a few more. When I was 12, my dad taught me how to read topographic maps before I ever touched a video game. Said if I could understand how land lies, I'd never get lost, on paper or in life. I used to think it was just sentimental cowboy wisdom. Turns out, it's also how you gut a liar in court. That fake deed Jared dropped on my doorstep was laughable. But I wasn't going to just laugh. I was going to eviscerate it with science. First, I pulled every county archive I could get my hands on, digital and microfilm. I traced parcel ownership back to the 1960s. At no point ever was anyone named Fawcett on record. No handshake ranchers, no mysterious deeds, no grandfather ghosts, just clean title transfer from ranching families to my father in 1997. All legally recorded, all tax-linked, all verifiable. But I didn't stop there. I drove out to Flagstaff and sat down with a contact at the Arizona State Land Department. We reviewed satellite records, historical overlays, and public domain USGS surveys. I found clear aerial photographs from 1974, 1982, and 1994. And guess what? The land was exactly the same in every one of them. No buildings, no fences, no human activity, just mesquite, brush, cactus, and the occasional tire trail. I printed every image. On the oldest one, I circled a small, dark speck and wrote, "Goat," not Jared's grandpa. But the real kill shot came when I took a closer look at the rediscovered deed itself. The formatting was off. The typewriter font didn't match any used in county records from that era. And the signature? A known county clerk from the 70s whose name was misspelled, Sloppy. Mitchell submitted all of it to the court with a motion for sanctions. He didn't even bother to hide his glee when he included a blown-up comparison between the fake seal and an authentic one. "Note the eagle's beak curvature," he wrote. "One resembles official insignia. The other looks like a wet pigeon." The judge, an older man with a reputation for patience and contempt for theatrics, took one look at our packet and sighed. He turned to Jared's attorney, a man who looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last 2 weeks. "Counsel," the judge said, "your client submitted forged evidence to this court?" The lawyer stammered, "Your Honor, we were relying on a third-party expert and—" The judge held up a hand. "Let me be clear. If you attempt to proceed on the basis of this document, I will refer the matter to the district attorney. Forensic forgery is not a civil issue. It's criminal. Understood?" The case stalled right there. Jared's claim of adverse possession had already been flimsy. Now it was radioactive. But rather than accept reality, he did what cornered men often do. He lashed out. One morning, I pulled up to my office and found my front window shattered. Nothing stolen, just broken glass and a cheap message. Spray paint across the door. Thief. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I waited. That afternoon, I received a visit from a police officer. Officer Grant. Broad shoulders, serious face. He had questions about an incident out on my land. According to the report, Jared claimed I had broken into the house, damaged a bathroom, and threatened him over property disputes. There was no footage. Conveniently, the cameras had been damaged during the alleged break-in. Jared had submitted photos. A cracked mirror, a toppled lamp, and a shattered window that looked suspiciously like the one from my office. "Mr. Manning," Officer Grant asked, "do you have any alibi for last night between 9 p.m. and 11? I nodded. "Yep, I was playing cards with a friend. And if that's not enough, I've got something better." I pulled out a USB stick and handed it over. "See? After Jared's first social media stunt, I had installed a perimeter camera of my own, discreetly mounted on a utility pole across the road. And it caught everything. The footage showed Jared pacing around his yard after dark, drinking something out of a red Solo cup. At approximately 9:30, he walked around the side of the house with a hammer and broke his own back window. At 10:15, he threw the broken lamp into the pool. At 10:40, he held up his phone and took dramatic damage photos. He staged the whole thing. Officer Grant's eyebrows lifted so high they nearly reached his hairline. He watched the video twice. "Mind if I forward this to the detectives unit?" "Be my guest." That same night, Jared went quiet on social media. No poolside rants, no snarky hashtags, no selfies with contractors. Just radio silence. Mitchell called me the next morning. "You realize you just walked him straight into a criminal charge, right?" "I didn't walk him. He sprinted." "He's going to lose everything." "I know," I said, sipping coffee with a grin, "but I'm not done yet." Because for the first time since this mess began, Jared was on the defensive. He'd lost the narrative. He wasn't the builder with vision anymore. He was the guy who forged a deed, faked a break-in, and tried to frame the actual owner of the land. And we had all of it on record. Jared went dark, but I knew better than to mistake silence for surrender. That kind of man. He doesn't quit. He waits. He schemes. And when that doesn't work, he swings wild. Sure enough, about a week after the police cleared me of the break-in hoax, I got a call from Mitchell. "He's back in court," he said, "trying to file an emergency motion to block your ownership rights." I raised an eyebrow. "On what grounds? Psychic inheritance?" "Worse. He's claiming detrimental reliance, that he made significant investments under the reasonable belief he owned the land. He's asking the court to either grant him possession or force you to compensate him for the cost of the house." I laughed. "He wants me to pay him for squatting on my land." Mitchell chuckled. "He's not just desperate. He's broke. I think this is his final play." And it was weak. He couldn't prove reasonable belief when we had videos of him saying he didn't know who owned the land. He couldn't claim ignorance when tax notices had my name on them. And he sure as hell couldn't ask for money after attempting to frame me for a crime. But still, I wasn't going to get cocky. While we prepped for the next hearing, I ordered a comprehensive property damage assessment. Not of my land, of his house. I wanted to know what he'd built, what permits he'd skipped, and what violations he'd racked up trying to cut corners. The results came back with a satisfying thud. There were over a dozen code violations, from improper electrical grounding to unlicensed pool installation. His septic tank didn't meet minimum distance from the well lines. The second-floor balcony, no load test passed. The entire structure was, in official terms, a non-conforming, non-permitted residential hazard. Translation: he'd built a Barbie dream house on quicksand. I handed the report to Mitchell and told him to sharpen the knives. Court was held in person this time. I wore a clean shirt and a smile. Jared showed up looking like he hadn't slept in days. His lawyer looked worse. He knew they were walking into a buzzsaw. The judge didn't waste time. "Mr. Fawcett," he said, tapping the bench with his pen, "you are asking this court to either grant you legal ownership of land you do not hold title to, or force the rightful owner to purchase improvements you constructed without permission." "Yes, Your Honor," Jared said, clearly coached to sound respectful. "After you submitted forged documentation," Jared flinched. "That wasn't me." "After you falsely reported a break-in?" His lawyer interjected, "Your Honor, the matter of the vandalism is still under investigation." "No, it is not," the judge said, holding up the USB stick. "We received police verification of this footage. Case closed." I watched Jared visibly shrink in his chair. Then Mitchell stood and laid out the property violation report like he was unveiling a war crime. He presented a breakdown of estimated costs to remediate the illegal construction, to remove all non-compliant structures, restore the land to its original state, and bring it up to environmental compliance. It would cost $180,000. Alternatively, Mitchell offered, Mr. Fawcett may choose to leave the structure intact and relinquish all claims, allowing Mr. Manning to take possession and pursue civil damages. The judge didn't even blink. "Mr. Fawcett, I am prepared to rule," Jared's lawyer whispered furiously. But it didn't matter. The judge declared, title to the land remained solely and unambiguously with Calvin Manning. All improvements made by Mr. Fawcett were unlawful and conducted without consent, permit, or right. Mr. Manning was awarded full ownership of the structure, effective immediately. Mr. Fawcett was ordered to either pay $320,000 in damages and unlawful occupancy penalties or vacate the property within 14 days with no claim to the structure. The gavel came down like a guillotine. Jared didn't speak. He just stared ahead, jaw clenched, as if trying to remember a reality where he was winning. Outside the courthouse, a reporter tried to get a quote. I gave them a wave and said, "No comment, except to thank my neighbor for his contributions to my real estate portfolio." Back at home, I poured myself a drink and sat by the window, staring out over a stretch of dirt and pride. Not because it was over, not yet, but because I could feel the tide turning. The bulldozer wouldn't be coming for me. It would be coming for him. There's something uniquely satisfying about watching a man drown in his own confidence. 2 days after the verdict, Jared tried to file an appeal. He argued the judgment was excessive and morally punitive. The court clerk took the paperwork and the fee, but it didn't matter. Mitchell filed a motion to dismiss within 24 hours, backed by a mountain of evidence and a very polite reminder that fraudulent filings can disqualify appeals altogether. The court denied his request within the week. Jared didn't just lose the house. He lost everything tethered to the illusion of ownership. Turns out he'd taken out personal loans to build the place. About $100,000 in contractor debt, plus materials, plus a pool that was installed with verbal agreements and unpaid invoices. When the news broke that he no longer had legal claim to the property, his creditors started circling like buzzards. One contractor sued for breach. Another liened his actual property. 2 lots down, a vacant patch of dirt with a half-finished shed, and 3 broken lawnmowers rusting in the sun. The bank called in a loan. His credit tanked. His mortgage application for a second lot evaporated overnight. I kept my distance. I wasn't vindictive. I wasn't gloating. But I was thorough. I made sure that when I filed the ownership transfer for the house, it was recorded with every county agency that mattered. Zoning, assessor, utility, environmental compliance. The process took less than a week. On the 7th day, I got the email. Title confirmed, structure registered, property fully secured under my name. I drove out to the lot that same evening. I parked where Jared used to keep his Range Rover, gone now, repossessed, and stepped out onto my dirt like it was the first time. Only it wasn't dirt anymore. It was a luxury home with a saltwater pool, stone fencing, and patio lighting that flickered slightly in the wind. The irony was absurd. I never built anything here. I never even laid gravel. But now I had a house, paid for entirely by someone else's delusion. The place was quiet, clean, too. Jared had vacated, left the place mostly intact. A few missing electronics, no fridge, but the pool pump still worked, and the landscaping hadn't died yet. I walked inside, did a full inspection, room by room. Hardwood floors, granite counters, a walk-in shower with steam settings and Bluetooth speakers embedded in the ceiling. It smelled like lemon cleaner and failure. I poured myself a glass of water from the reverse osmosis tap, thanks, Jared, and walked out back. The stars were starting to come out. Coyotes howled somewhere in the distance. I lit a cigar, leaned on the railing, and looked out over the empty dirt road leading to the city's future development. That's when I decided it needed a name. I ordered a custom bronze plaque the next day. It arrived 3 weeks later. I bolted it to the gate, right beneath the new mailbox. The Free House. Underneath, in smaller letters, donated by neighborly misjudgment. I invited friends, family, and Mitchell out for a soft housewarming. We grilled ribs, floated in the pool, and laughed about the sheer absurdity of it all. Even the judge stopped by for a burger, unofficially, of course. I installed another sign in the backyard, facing the main road. Not too big, just enough to be seen from passing cars. It featured a laminated photo of Jared, looking smug, shirtless by the pool from one of his old videos. The caption read, "Here lived America's most confident trespasser." No one vandalized it. No one tore it down. People stopped, took selfies, tagged it online, seek free house. Thanks, Jared. And Jared? He ended up living in a trailer behind his sister's place on the north end of town. Word was he'd started working security at a parking lot, which felt fitting in a grim, poetic way. He told anyone who'd listen that he'd been robbed, cheated, framed, but the city records said otherwise. The truth sat there, sunbathing in full legal clarity. And I just made the final payment on a hot tub upgrade. A year passed, fast. The house, the one I never meant to own, started making money. I rented it out for $4,000 a month to a tech consultant from Phoenix. Nice guy, never complains, pays on time. Pool's still crystal clear. The plaque is still at the gate. People take pictures with it. Some think it's a joke. Some know the story. Last week, a local news station ran a piece titled, "From Surveyor to Landlord: How One Man Claimed a House Built on His Own Dirt." I did the interview out back, cigar in hand, feet in the pool Jared paid for. When the anchor asked, "Do you feel like you won?" I paused. "Nah," I said, grinning. "I just parked on my own land. Jared did the rest." Then I winked at the camera. A few nights later, I stopped by to check the irrigation system. As I pulled up, I noticed a car parked across the road. Rusted Ford. Hood dented. Headlights off. Inside, Jared. He didn't get out. Just sat there, arms on the wheel, staring at the house like it owed him something. I walked to the gate, leaned against it, and raised my bottle of water in a silent toast. He didn't move. Then, slowly, he started the engine, turned the car around, and drove off into the dark. No words, no threats, just gone. And me? I turned back to the house, turned off the porch light, and smiled.